Hi friends, welcome back to Three Barrow Farm and to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how I make the best gluten-free bread. So I have put the recipe down below, but I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process because it is a little bit difficult to describe. Now, this recipe has been adapted from 3 different recipes that one of my clients, Elizabeth, found online. So she has adapted it, and over many years, through trial and error, she has come up with the best recipe, and I'm going to share it with you today. Thank you so much to Elizabeth for the recipe. I have adapted the recipe myself to make a larger family-sized loaf. So I started with doubling the loaf, but doubling the water wasn't quite enough. So through some trial and error of my own, I've managed to perfect the recipe for a larger loaf. Now I have the measurements of my tin down below, but I also make this recipe in a larger, longer tin, and it works out perfectly fine. It's just not as tall as the loaf in this tin here. So to begin with, I have spread some butter throughout the whole tin. You can use some baking paper if you prefer, but I find that the loaf just slips out perfectly when I use butter. So there are 4 main ingredients for this bread. There's brown rice flour, buckwheat flour, tapioca starch, and maize flour. So I mill my own brown rice flour and buckwheat flour. So these 2 flours are home milled, so they're a little bit coarser than normal, and this recipe is adapted for this sort of flour. You might find that you need less water if you're using store purchased flour with these 2 ingredients. The other 2 I buy myself, and all of these ingredients are organic and really cheap in bulk. So if you purchase the flour in bulk, it's much more affordable. And this bread, I think we worked out the loaf to cost around $3.50 or $4, depending on where we get our ingredients from. But that is a pretty cheap gluten-free loaf. We're also going to be using a little bit of sugar to help the yeast rise. We're going to be using some chia seeds. Now, you might want to use white chia seeds so that you don't see those specks of black in your bread. We don't really mind. We've got a heap of black chia seeds. So we're just using what we have on hand rather than purchasing more chia seeds. We're also going to be using yeast in this recipe as well. And I almost forgot, we're also going to be adding salt into our bread as well. So we're going to start with weighing all the flours into a bowl. You want a big enough bowl that you can mix this around without it spilling over. So we're going by weights, and we're going to start with the brown rice flour. We're going to add 280 grams into the bowl. Okay, next we're going to weigh in the buckwheat. So we're going to add 200 grams of buckwheat. Then we have our maize flour. We're going to add 160 grams of the maize. And then the tapioca starch. We're going to add 108 grams into the mix. One thing I like to do is make up a few of these mixes and then store them in containers so that I have the flour ready to go, and all I need to do is add the water part to it and then bake it. So it's really handy for me, particularly being off grid, to have some of these ready to go so that when there is a sunny day, I can pop the oven on and make a loaf. Okay, now we're going to add 4 teaspoons of salt, And we're going to mix all of this together. So all the 4 flours are mixed together nicely. And I like to make a little bit of a well in my flour so that when I go to add the water later, it goes into the middle. So we'll set this aside for now and we'll get our wet mixture sorted. Okay, now we're up to the liquid section of the recipe. You will need another bowl for this and a whisk. So we're going to measure the water into here. I put 870 grams of water in. Now I add in cold water and boiling water to get the correct temperature to add the sugar and dissolve it, and then to add the yeast and get it activating. So I'm going to add around 400 grams of cold water. And then I've got my boiling water here. So I'm going to add the rest, just going to test it out a bit. You want it to be not too hot and obviously not too cold. I'm actually going to add a little bit more and then I'll add some cold in again. All right, we have our 870 grams of water. So I want to be able to put my finger in and it be hot, but not too hot that it's sort of burning my finger. So next we're going to put our 2 tablespoons of sugar into the water. And we're going to stir that until it's dissolved. All right, and then we're going to add in our 4 teaspoons of yeast. Now this is where we can find out whether the water was warm enough and not too hot. But basically you want it to be warmer than lukewarm. Okay, we're going to let this sit and you'll see what happens. The yeast is going to rise on top. So the yeast is perfect now. It has risen, so we are ready to add the chia seeds. So we're going to add half a cup of chia seeds into the mixture and we're going to whisk it all up. And now we're going to let the mixture sit for 10 minutes. Okay, it has been 10 minutes and your chia seeds should be a bit hard to mix. They've sort of stiffened up on the top there, and we're just going to mix them all in, give them a little gentle whisk together. And now we're going to add them into our dry mixture. So we're going to mix this up till all of the flour is mixed in with the water mixture. All right, that looks perfect now, and this is the consistency we want. We want the mixture to stay on the spoon. All right, we are ready to put this into the loaf tin. Okay, here is the tin, and I'm just going to pour the mixture in. Now I like to grab my spatula and just get all of the batter off the bowl and then also off the spoon. Okay, so we've got all the mixture in the tin, and I'm just going to flatten it slightly on top. And then we can add some sesame seeds on top. So I just like to sprinkle it on. There we go. You can even pat it down a little bit just to make sure that it's staying on there. Okay, and we're going to pop a tea towel over the top of this and let it sit until the bread rises to the top. While we are waiting for the bread to rise, I'm going to start heating the oven. So I'm going to turn my oven on to 190 degrees on the bake setting. You don't want to use fan forced, you just want to be baking the bread. Okay, I'm running a little bit short on time, so it's not quite as high as I'd want it to be, but let's pop it in the oven anyway, because I need to go and pick up my kids soon. So we're going to put this in the oven for 35 minutes at 190 degrees, and then we're going to turn it down to 180 and bake it for another 25 minutes. Let the bread sit overnight before cutting it. Trying to cut it while it is warm will be difficult to do. I hope you enjoy trying this recipe. Let me know in the comments below if you bake your own bread, and I'll see you next time, friends.